I went into the manga of a silent voice with no real idea of what it was about, but when I realized the primary focus would be on bullying, I was intrigued. As a kid, I was always put in quite the tizzy by bullies. I wasn't really bullied much myself, but watching others get bullied pissed me off more than anything else, and it was one of the greatest reasons that high school, middle school, and elementary school were all, and are all, annoying garbage. So getting me to give a crap about a bully was going to be quite the challenge, but the writer did it. This isn't the typical garbage where the bully is just some misunderstood kid with trouble at home. The kid just rationalizes what he's doing in a way that makes twisted, childish sense, and it's presented in such a way that I never really questioned what he was doing. Sure, I wanted him to stop, but I always understood why he thought this was okay. The way the bullying is presented made the first volume of the manga one of the story's highlights for me. Unfortunately, a Silent Voices movie adaptation doesn't do the best job of translating these ideas to another medium. I'm not saying that the movie does a poor job of this. On the contrary, beautiful animation and direction add to certain elements of the story. The opening music, ambient and with touches of what sounds like feedback, is arranged in a calming way. But the dynamic range and occasional surges in volume in the music produce an alarming but not surprising sense of panic. In other words, the music sounds like someone might feel when contemplating and going through a suicide. So it's absolutely perfect to use as Shoya, the movie's and manga's protagonist, is getting ready to do just that. We then cut to The Who's My Generation, which I didn't expect, but it works really well here. Lines like "I hope I die before I get old," just before Shoya and his friends jump off a bridge and into the cold river, serve as both foreshadowing and important tonal elements. And approximately 3.5 minutes into the movie, we have covered roughly 48 pages of the manga. Obviously, when adapting a 7-volume manga into a 2-hour movie, there are going to need to be things that get cut, and it's pretty understandable why they cut a lot of this material out of the movie. These opening 48 pages don't have much going for them in regards to the plot, but they have a very, very important purpose that is almost completely lost by skipping them in the movie. They set up Shoya's mindset and allow us to understand why he acts the way he does later on in the manga. Without these seemingly unimportant moments, we are left with Shoya being some fun-loving, troublemaking kid who just does these things because he doesn't know any better, and that's what some kids do. However, with these opening pages intact, we see a young boy whose friends are quickly growing more mature than he is, or at least they seem to be, who's grappling with the idea that growing up can be pretty boring and pretty lonely. In other words, a young boy who is having what may be the first existential crisis of his young life. Shoya confesses to the readers that he simply can't lose this battle against boredom, and that his life will always be entertaining. I think we can all relate to not wanting to be bored, not wanting to be lonely, and trying to stop both of those eventualities from finding us for any long or indefinite period of time. Well, even if we can't relate to that, it's definitely easier to relate to than the idea that this kid is just a jerk and that's all there really is to it. Now, I'm not saying that the movie handles this horribly. In fact, the scene where Shoko first enters the classroom and introduces herself to her new classmates is expertly directed and animated. Shoya's expression in particular, with that little look of growing excitement in his eyes as he realizes that Shoko is different from anyone else he's ever met, is perfectly captivating. And some of the development of his character that was lost by skipping over so much of the material is made up by his facial expressions. But I wouldn't really expect anything less from Kyoto Animation on this front. The next thing that both the manga and the movie try to show us is how the classmates turn from kind to cruel, and why this change occurs. Let's start with how the movie goes about this. The movie does a wonderful job of showing the classmates as realistically kind and intrigued at the start of Shoko's time at the school. Naoko in particular offers to help her take notes, but the show brilliantly and quickly shows how this becomes burdensome through this one moment. Naoko just looks a little bit tired of writing out all these notes for Shoko, and this has only just begun. Of course, she'll later say that she's been missing notes from the teacher because of this. Then we jump to choir class, where Shoko obviously performs poorly, and the other students are just expected to deal with it and move on. Also, while Naoko is chastised for her unenthusiastic reading of some passage of text, Shoko is praised for her reading, which obviously sounds bad because she can't speak very well. Through all of these events, Shoya watches on with a blank stare. Shoko is being characterized as a problem for the children, or at the very least a burden, and Shoya is becoming more and more aware of this. He sees her annoying other people, and decides this is a good opportunity to get some laughs out of the classmates. So while his mean behavior isn't caused by mere stupidity or cruelty, it is caused by wanting his classmates to laugh and enjoy his presence, and also by the fact that Shoko seems to be nothing more than a burden. This is a motive that a child may very well have, but a very different motive from the one shown in the manga, which was to never be bored. However, this isn't the only motive he acts on. He also acts on this lack of comfort most children and adults feel when encountered with something they've never seen before. With no other children around, he throws dirt in Shoko's face when she attempts to communicate with him, and says that she creeps him out. So Shoya has been established as a class clown of sorts who wants Shoko to stop disrupting classes, and who finds her weird and creepy, so he's going to be cruel to her. In 10 minutes, the movie has got this much done for the character dynamics, and it's done a fine job of this with no narration to speak of. That's one thing I love about the movie, the way that it mostly abandons the narration and instead chooses to show character dynamics through direction, animation, and dialogue. But with narration out of the mix, a lot of the nuance of Shoya's personality is lost, namely the existential crisis I mentioned earlier. However, his view of Shoko is also made less clear. In the manga, we are explicitly told that he sees her as some sort of space alien sent to disrupt his classes and to make his and his classmates' lives worse. With his lack of empathy for her position and his inability to listen, it becomes very easy for him to dehumanize her, and view her as nothing more than a toy that he can mess around with just to see what happens. The manga shows this mindset in such an amazing and strangely powerful way that I'm having trouble describing it here. The manga also shows Shoya as far less reactive than he is in the movie. What I mean by that is that Shoya starts being mean to Shoko before anyone even has a chance to get annoyed by her. This, all at once, makes Shoya a more active protagonist, shows him as having an internal struggle as well as an external one, and establishes his dynamic with Shoko before she even has a chance to do anything to change it. In some ways, this really makes Shoya even a more outwardly cruel person than he is in the movie, but the amount of his thoughts we've seen make him feel more human and well-rounded despite this. And in the manga, we also see how quickly the other children join in. And one of the largest moments of bullying we get to see, with a large chunk of the class involved, they write various cruel things on the blackboard. Now Shoya leads this action, however he does not do this on his own. The class pitches in and helps him just as they help him with many of his other bullying endeavors. As he even thinks to himself, it's just him and his merry men in a battle against Shoko. In the movie, he does this on his own and other classmates just watch. The movie paints Shoya as the only really active bully that Shoko has. Other kids might snicker and they definitely don't stop him, but overall it's just Shoya doing all of these horrible things to Shoko, which really changes the dynamic of the story when the kids turn on Shoya and pin everything on him. In the movie, this just feels natural because he really did seem like the only active bully. In the manga, where we see so many cruel things written in Shoko's notebook by a variety of students and where we see them help Shoya in so many of his bullying endeavors, this feels like a horrible injustice brought on by both the teacher's incompetence and how badly the classmates don't want to be on the line for a bunch of broken hearing aids. The whole story from this moment forward is shaped by this decision to have Shoya be so much worse than all the other students, especially when we consider the fact that the kids' bullying of Shoya doesn't reach the same emotional extremity it does in the manga, or at least the movie shows it in a more subtle way. This again is a change that mostly comes about because of choosing to skip the majority of the first 48 pages of the manga. We don't see much of Shoya's friendship with his two best friends, which makes the loss of Shoya's friends seem far less important, because we haven't had any chance to see much of the fun they had together. Well, at least beyond the opening song. Because the opening pages were skipped, we also don't know much about how Shoya is worried about being bored, and what better way to be bored as a kid than to be completely and utterly isolated from everyone. In other words, in the manga, Shoya's worst fears have come true. In the movie, everything just has to do with a sort of twisted karma. One moment from the manga which is entirely missing from the movie is when Shoya's mom gives him cake to eat with his friends and he goes up to his room with his cake and pretends to be his friends, shouting like they used to. This strange embarrassment at being bullied and losing his friend struck me beyond any other section in the first volume of the manga, and it would have lent a lot to the movie if it had been left in. Another thing that changes about the way Shoya is bullied is how he reacts to it. In the movie, he is immediately made so uncomfortable and embarrassed by these events that he refuses to tell anyone about them that might care enough to stop it from happening. However, in the manga, he tries to tell his teacher that the students are bullying him, but the teacher won't listen to him and won't help him, further cementing an understanding in our minds, and in Shoya's mind, that the world is cruel and unfair, especially in regards to how he's treated. This leads to a lot of things being more implied than obviously stated. For example, in the movie, we understand that Shoya dislikes Shoko because she is now inherently tied to the bullying he experiences. However, in the manga, it is explicitly stated that he hates her because of this and that he, in the end, blames her for what's happened to him and is afraid to become like her. In fact, he tells himself that he's not like her. Then comes Shoya's planned suicide. This is one thing that I found the movie handled far worse than the manga, mainly because of how events were reordered, so that we open the movie with Shoya's plan to die, we then go back to the past, and then we jump forward to his talk with Shoko. However, at this point, we have completely missed the extent of Shoya's isolation and social anxiety, which was brought on by an extremity of bullying and emotions that simply isn't present in the movie. I'm not saying that it's unrealistic for an individual to kill themselves because of what's happened to the movie Shoya, but I felt it was far more likely that the manga version would kill himself. Again, this is because in the manga, we first see how Shoya isolates himself by assuming what everyone else is thinking and saying, even as he moves far beyond his middle school years. In his own head, he will always be the brunt of his own bullying, and people are just vessels through which this may occur. Yes, the movie will go on to show this, but it shows it after we already know Shoya isn't going to kill himself, and not showing this first makes the scene with Shoko so much less powerful. We don't know this is supposed to be his goodbye to Shoko until he has already offered to be her friend, so the moment where he extends his hand in friendship isn't quite the same. Sure, it's implied that he should be saying goodbye to her, considering that we've already seen his suicide preparations, but I think some things are better when they're clearly shown instead of left to the audience to piece together. That is one of the big differences between the two versions that will become increasingly apparent for better or worse. Where the manga is in your face and obvious as far as Shoya's and other characters' feelings are concerned, the movie takes a far more subtle approach to the story. In the next episode of this video series, we'll be delving further into that. But for now, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like and subscribe. Leave some comments down below about what you thought of the movie, the manga, or both. Thanks again. Bye bye.